Welcome back to the ADM+S in Conversation series, where we discuss how AI and ADM technologies are impacting our day-to-day, based on recent research by members at the Centre. Today we're talking to Dr Zahra Stardust from Queensland University of Technology about her new book, Indie Porn, which explores the innovative and challenging efforts of independent porn producers to navigate the technological, legal, and societal challenges present in the industry and demonstrates how these struggles intersect with broader issues of stigma, capitalism, and social justice. Zahra, thank you so much for joining me. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your research background?
My name's Dr Zahra Stardust. I'm a porn studies scholar, and my work really focuses on sexual content moderation and the political economy of sex tech.
And as part of that work, you've just put out your new book, Indie Porn. Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Indie Porn is a book about the revolutionary promises of the movement for independent pornographies, and it's also about the regulatory fantasies of governments and big tech, and it's about the resistance politics that are employed during the clash between them.
And so starting with the basics, what do we mean when we talk about indie porn?
Indie porn is a relational term. It's an umbrella term. It's something that relates to structures and budgets and practices. The genre is really characterized by communities, by relationships, by partnerships and collaborations. It's about people who are using the resources and the skills around them in a very DIY way to set up alternative relationships to porn production, porn representation, porn distribution, and porn consumption outside mainstream models.
So before we get into talking about some of the things that are discussed in the book, you mentioned at the top of this episode that you're a porn studies scholar. So can you talk a little bit about your journey up until now? What was the motivation for this book, and what issues inspired it, I guess?
I started this research when I was working as an indie porn performer, and I was part of a documentary made by Sense8 Films that screened at the Berlin Porn Film Festival, and it was all about independent porn production in Australia. And at the time I was working on my own subscription site, and I was really interested in the kinds of ethics and production practices that I saw around me versus the way that governments were thinking about porn regulation and what they imagined to happen on set. So that was the beginning of my PhD research, which was all about queer and feminist porn production in Australia. And from there, I went on to conduct autoethnographic research. I conducted qualitative interviews among performers and producers. And I also conducted legal and archival review to understand the history of porn regulation.
I love how you frame it like that project inspired your project and, that will inspire the next. It's really the evolution of academia.
Yeah.
So moving on, in the book you talk about some of the problems that indie porn producers come up against, whether that be in the stages of production or distribution. How does technology and I guess the accessibility of emerging technologies play a role in the democratisation of content?
The way that porn is produced has changed dramatically over the last few decades. It's no longer siloed to LA studios. It's something that is very much geographically dispersed around the world. People are making porn with their smartphones, with their friends, in their bedrooms. With the COVID pandemic, we also see more people turning to various forms of online sex work, where they have chronic illness, where they have carer responsibilities, where they are looking for flexible work, where they are facing high cost of living or rental crisis. We also have an advent and increase in direct-to-consumer sites like OnlyFans. So the people who are creating pornography are more diverse than ever before. And this has really democratized the content, but not necessarily the distribution of porn. So we have people working behind the camera and in front of the camera who are instigating all these different kinds of ethics of care, who are fighting for model rights, who are trying to build mutual aid programs, who are really wanting to change the way that labour and power operate in the media industry. But unfortunately, the democratization of content hasn't necessarily been met with the democratization of distribution. So the distribution process is still very centralized, and this is a major challenge for indie producers.
And in addition to some of those distribution challenges, you yourself have a law background. Can you elaborate a little bit on some of the other issues that indie porn producers face, whether that be from a regulatory angle or technological, economic?
The entire regulatory framework, whether it be economic or technical or legal, is really designed to deter indie production. There's so many barriers that are facing indie producers, and these stem from the criminalisation of porn production, sale, screening and advertising, to financial discrimination that faces sex workers and sex-related businesses, whether it be from banks or payment processors. It's also the platforms themselves and their ranking systems, which prioritise white, slim, able-bodied, heterosexual, vanilla kinds of presentations and activities, and suppress Black and Indigenous performers and performers of colour according to an aesthetic white supremacist hierarchy. It's also credit card companies who will ban specific activities that have a disproportionate effect on women's bodies, on trans people's bodies, on queer sexual practices. It's also the platforms who will demonetize and shadow ban and block and deplatform sex workers. So there's a whole regulatory environment that is set up to make it very difficult to be visible and viable as an independent porn producer. And that's even before you have tube sites who dominate the marketplace and who cannibalize the SEO search results, so that it's very difficult to divert traffic and income to your own individual site.
Yeah, it seems like there's some serious irony behind the fact that, you know, the rules and regulations of platforms are what keep a lot of people from producing, but they're also what inspire people to go and find other avenues.
I think the irony really is that the criminalization prompts other kinds of transgression. Like, people find pleasure in their experience as sexual outlaws, or people find that the laws are unjust, or the laws are outdated, or the laws are irrelevant. And so they're pioneering their own other ethical paths.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. Anyway, getting into more of what's talked about in the book. So we've identified some of those barriers that indie porn producers face. How are people navigating these in real life?
So indie porn producers have responded to this environment with different strategies and techniques. They have diversified their income streams. They have urged consumers to pay for your porn, which is a big campaign that really is about supporting the labour of porn performance. They have formed affiliate networks to incentivise referrals to one another's sites. People have found alternative distribution methods. People have created partnerships where they are looking to certify different kinds of ethical production practices, and people are fighting also for performer rights, creating different performer codes for rights and well-being.
Yeah, I love how people are kind of taking things into their own hands in an industry where historically, you know, it's been heavily regulated. Moving on to some of the key takeaways from your book, what kinds of recommendations do you make about the regulation of pornography based on your research?
The regulatory approach to pornography at present is really about restricting access, and it's also about screening and detecting and taking down sexual content. And I think this is a missed opportunity. It's a real focus on a techno-solutionist approach instead of something more holistic like sex education and porn literacy. It's also based on a fantasy of what pornography is and what pornography does. And regulators assume that pornography is risky, it's dangerous, it's corruptive, and they miss all of the opportunities where porn has merit and political value and is a creative economy. And in doing so, it forecloses opportunities to create the kinds of pornography that could actually lead to more democratic and diverse sexual cultures online and offline.
I love you use the word techno-solutionist. As a concept, how is that playing out in this context?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of techno-solutionist approaches in this area where they see technology as the fix for what is actually a social and cultural problem. Like, the problem is whorephobia or the problem is misogyny. You can't fix that with age verification. You can't fix that with like quick band-aid solutions. That's actually something that needs investment in a community level, in an educational level. You can use the skills and knowledge and wisdom of porn performers who are actually doing really critical work around media literacy and porn literacy with young people, who are creating their own websites to showcase and role model how to do better sexual communication. There's all of this really positive, productive stuff happening in that space. And instead, governments and tech platforms really want to focus on quick kind of tech solutions that can be shipped and scaled. I think if we want to democratize pornography, and I don't mean just in terms of the content and the representation, but in terms of the profits, in terms of the distribution, we really need to focus on decriminalizing pornography. We need to focus on reducing the power of media monopolies. We need to support platform cooperatives so that sex workers can own and control their own imagery. And we need to invest in porn literacy as part of sex education curriculums. Overwhelmingly, this is an issue about working capitalism. And so we need to ensure that people have access to basic housing and health and social services so that people can build a different relationship to work.
So the topics that you've discussed can obviously be relevant to anyone and everyone, but who do you think will be interested in this book and why?
I think the book will be of interest to a range of different people, from sex workers to scholars to policy analysts and politicians. The heart of the book is really about social movements, and it's about how we build strategies and how we might form coalitions with other social movements for a more equitable and just society. So I think one of the values, or one of my intentions behind it, was to put porn performers in conversation with a range of other actors, including people who are working in creative and precarious labour, people who are interested in bodily autonomy and reproductive rights, people who are invested in biopolitical surveillance, people who are invested in the politics of law reform and respectability politics, and how all of these things play out in social movements from the community level up to the representational level. And so my hope is that people from a range of different disciplines, from a range of different practices and backgrounds will be able to learn from the experiences of indie porn performers and use them as part of their own social movements.
I love it. An inspiring note to leave this chat on. But firstly, where can we find this book?
The book is currently available for pre-sale from Duke University Press, and it will be available in bookstores from October.
Well, thank you, Zahra, for this chat. I hope everyone feels motivated to get their hands on a copy of your book. And if you're interested in hearing more from our researchers looking at issues, innovations, ethics, and more around AI and ADM systems in everyday life, go to admscentre.org/podcast and look out for the In Conversation thumbnail.